So I think that this looks a bit like a follow-up question to the Intel question that we just had. Do you think AMD's decision to make FSR an open source technology is a good idea? Is this a clever move by them, seeing as NVIDIA are well known for trying to strong-arm people down their proprietary route? Would the future of tech be a better place if we had more open source technologies like this? So, again, AMD kind of didn't have a choice but to make FSR an open technology in a similar way to Intel, in that
it certainly helped.
They're not in a dominant market position, so it makes it harder to sell proprietary features. And we've seen that before with things like FreeSync. Yep. FreeSync wouldn't have been as successful if it was locked to AMD GPUs. And I think AMD's strategy here is very different to what NVIDIA is trying to achieve. AMD is trying to not necessarily sell people on AMD GPUs through FSR specifically. You're not going to necessarily buy an AMD GPU to use FSR because it also works on NVIDIA GPUs. But what they're trying to do is minimize the selling point of DLSS by making it open. So it's kind of, they're not attracting people, they're trying to detract people from their competitors' product and what they've built.
Yep.
So, and that's really the only strategy that I think was potentially a play for them long term. And things like making it open source encourage developers to use it. It makes it a bit easier to integrate. And I guess that comes down to the tech as well being
all of that said,
easier.
They didn't have to make it work on NVIDIA GPUs to achieve any of those things.
But it certainly helps.
I'm not sure. I think it's... ultimately, we'd probably have to ask them what their motivation was for doing that, because, again, I see what you're saying. It incentivizes developers to focus on FSR opposed to DLSS because more of their customers can benefit from that work.
Yeah, I think if you're a developer and you've only got a limited amount of resources to use, then you could integrate DLSS, which is going to capture a portion of the gaming market, or use FSR, which is going to capture all gamers. And I think that's the strategy AMD is trying to play there. It
doesn't, like we've seen games that are hugely popular are generally multiplayer games that are easy to run.
Yeah.
So people can enjoy it on just about any hardware, whether it's like League of Legends or Fortnite. Or
stuff that runs on APUs on laptops is super popular.
So if you can include a technology in your game that allows it to run on way more hardware, then that's what you would prioritize, because that, it expands your install base. So that's one of the reasons why they would have done it. Also, does it win AMD some favor by helping out people with lowly Pascal GPUs still trying to get by, and then all of a sudden, for the very similar quality, they're looking at 30-40% more performance? That's a big deal.
Yeah, I think it's, from that sense, again, it's not going to sell you necessarily on an AMD GPU, but it helps their brand. So that
I'm not saying it's going to convert everybody, but all I'm getting at is if you bought, a GTX 1060 and NVIDIA is no longer prioritizing you for driver optimization, you're seeing performance get worse and worse in new games, which happens anyway. I'm not saying they're gimping the performance or anything. Games become more demanding. But then the competitor comes along and hands you like 30-40% more performance.
It certainly helps with their perception. I think it would help, the next time you want to upgrade and,
you'd consider them at least.
Yeah, there's an AMD GPU that is, competitive on a whole bunch of other stuff. And that's just one of those things that could tip you over, being like, oh, well, they did that thing. So that's the thing that works in their favor, I think.
I know it was certainly... If I was someone who always bought GeForce and didn't consider a Radeon GPU, I know that would at least get me to consider.
Yeah, so part of this question says, would the future of tech be a better place if we had more open source technologies like this? Again, it's one of those... It depends. We love saying it depends on this channel.
You could easily say yes, obviously, because, but would we have got FSR without DLSS?
Exactly, and I think, companies... obviously, ideally, everything would be open source. That would be amazing if everything was. But, companies aren't necessarily as willing to invest in open source solutions.
You don't get that arms race.
Yeah, you don't get the, companies develop things for their own self-interest to sell you more products, and making things open source doesn't serve those goals as well. So you kind of run this balancing act of, it would be nice if everything was open source, but if you want the best technology, then sometimes proprietary development is needed to get those high quality features. And then, as we've seen with DLSS, that incentivizes competition. So you've released DLSS, and then competitors, and it's not just AMD, it's other game engine developers that try and develop their own technologies. They see what's possible, they try and work to compete with it, to support on new platforms and that sort of thing. So I think both approaches can be beneficial to consumers in the long term. It's just about making sure that when you do make proprietary tech, that it doesn't unnecessarily lock you down into certain things that aren't required. Like, for example, a tech that, imagine if DLSS was locked down to just 30 series GPUs. That wouldn't make a lot of sense. So you wouldn't want that to happen.